live cash games. While I wait for people to trickle in before we get started, make sure you head over to pokercoaching.com/guestcoach. We are having a contest right now. We have a brand new guest coach at pokercoaching.com who we are going to be revealing later in this webinar. So make sure you head over to pokercoaching.com/guestcoach to get in that right now. Also, right now on pokercoaching.com, literally everything on the entire site is free. It'll cost you $0 from November 9th to November 13th. Head over to pokercoaching.com/pass right now to get it. If anyone's here in the chat, feel free to say hello. Let me know. This is a live video. Remember, live, anything can happen. But don't worry, we have this pretty much under control. We've been doing a lot of work at pokercoaching.com, and I am very, very, very excited to be able to share it all with you today. First, though, we're going to be talking some poker strategy because I want to talk to you about some very, very important poker concepts that will go a long way to helping you improve your win rate. I think people are here. Let's get started. Today, a big secret, a big strategy in high-stakes games that a lot of people, well, don't quite understand is that you should make a point to use dynamic bet sizes. What are dynamic bet sizes? A dynamic bet size means you're betting either, well, you can use any size. We're playing no limit Texas style. Sometimes you should be betting tiny, sometimes you should be betting large. And in my very in-depth, gigantic, new, advanced cash game course at pokercoaching.com, we discuss lots of spots in cash games where you should be using sometimes really tiny bets and sometimes really deep stacks, or big bets with deep stacks. There we go. Realize, though, that adding multiple bet sizes to your strategy is going to complicate your strategy and make it more difficult to implement. And you're going to find that in general, choosing to play a slightly more simple strategy, especially in spots that are complex or spots that you're not familiar with, may actually be a much better strategy than trying to implement a much more complex strategy that involves multiple bet sizes. That said, if you are actually working to get very good at poker, meaning you are devoting a decent amount of time and effort to it, you're going to gain way more expected value by playing strategies that are actually closer to the GTO strategy, which will use multiple bet sizes. Also, a big benefit of using bet sizes your opponent may not be used to is you will take them to areas of the game tree that they are not used to being in, which means that they are going to make more mistakes, and that's essentially going to make you much more difficult to play against. If you've seen my cash game masterclass at pokercoaching.com, you know that we tried to keep it implementable, actionable, good high-value content, but not that difficult to implement. What we did in that course, we recommended a 33% pot or a 66% pot bet in most scenarios, though we did go through some corner cases. And then on the turn in the river, a 33%, 66%, or 120% pot size bet. Now, that's plenty for most people. You're going to find most people in most cash games bet far too big in general, and they leave a lot of money on the table. But you need to make a point to learn to implement these sizes. And today, we're going to be going through some exploitative scenarios where you definitely want to be using bet sizes that are different than even what the GTO strategy recommends. As a quick example of this, for how much you gain just by using slightly better bet sizes, imagine a spot where you're on the button, you raise 100 big blinds deep, and the big blind calls. Okay, flop comes ace, king, 5. This is a spot where if you allow the game theory optimal solver to use all possible bet sizes, your EV in this pot is 4.16 big blinds. But if you allow it to only use a 33% pot or 66% pot size bet on the flop, you're going to realize 4.08 big blinds out of this pot. So in this scenario where you actually should be using big bets on the flop, an overbet continuation bet, you gain 8 big blinds per 100 hands. If you know anything about win rates, if you're playing in a tough game, you may win 5 big blinds per 100 hands. So getting 8 big blinds per 100 hands, additional, just because you know how to implement a large bet size well, is going to go a long way to adding a ton of value to your overall strategy. What hand do you have when you're betting this? We are discussing how to play all sorts of portions of your range. I can tell you, though, you're going to be betting big with your hands that are almost always good but vulnerable. If I had to guess, ace, queen, that kind of hand. Also, stuff like straight draws. These are hands that are going to love to blast it on this board. On other boards that are not so good for you, where you have the range advantage but not the nut advantage, which again, if you are unfamiliar with the terminology, make sure you check out the Cash Game Masterclass at pokercoaching.com. When you have the range advantage but not the nut advantage, this is a spot where you're going to want to be betting very small. Now, If you are used to playing tournaments, you will know that a small bet is often like one big blind. In cash games, you often should go tiny, but perhaps not the absolute minimum, especially with deep stacks. But, for example, say you raise button, big blind calls, flop comes 8-4-4. If you consider the range of the button, they're going to have way fewer fours than the big blind, right? So this is a spot where you're going to want to use a tiny continuation bet of about one big blind or 1.5 big blinds in this situation because, yeah, we have a bit of a range advantage due to having all the overpairs, but we lack the nut advantage because we lack fours. And for that reason, we gain a little bit of EV by using a smaller bet size. I have an advanced cash game course coming out very, very soon on pokercoaching.com, and we go through all these spots from a GTO point of view. But today, for all of you, I wanted to discuss some exploitative reasons to bet large, and then some exploitative reasons to bet small, because I think this is good, actionable information that will help you a ton in your games, no matter the stakes that you are playing. So when should we exploitatively bet large? Well, obviously, you want to know what your opponent is doing incorrectly. You need to pay attention to your opponents and figure out their strategy so that you can then adjust away from a good, strong GTO strategy to take advantage of what they're doing incorrectly. And there are three main times you're going to want to exploitatively bet large in cash games. The first is when your opponent is inelastic to bet sizes, meaning if they have something decent, they're going to call no matter what you bet within reason. A lot of players will call a tiny bet just as often as they will call a pot size bet. And if that's the case, you obviously want to be betting bigger with your value hands just to get more money in the pot. Next, if your opponent does not check raise often enough or raise often enough, you need to bet bigger immediately with your strong hands just to get money into the pot, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get all the money in the pot, and that's not good. Another time to bet bigger is when the big blind defends too wide such that your nut advantage is larger. You should know that as you have a bigger and bigger nut advantage, that leads to you wanting to use bigger and bigger sizes in general. So let's take a look at an example. Here we have a spot where we are raising the button, and here is the big blind strategy, 100 big blinds deep. This strategy here is the game theory optimal strategy. You can get this straight from pokercoaching.com. Lots of people from India and Ireland here today. Hello, welcome. This is a spot where your opponent should be 3-betting these hands in red, calling the hand in green, folding the hands in blue. However, most people in most live cash games defend too wide. As you can see, we have them defending just a little bit too wide here, like King 8 offsuit, 10 8 offsuit, 8 7 offsuit. These hands are naturally all folds, right? But this is a spot where I do think a lot of live players are just going to call and see the flop every time. They also actually defend a lot wider with stuff like Ace X, King X, whatever. And this makes them very, very exploitable. So if they're defending too wide, how should we adjust? Well, let's consider a flop of 9-5-2. Against a GTO big blind defender in this scenario, notice the preferred bet size that the solver uses here is 66% pot. And you are betting here decently often because this range is actually okay for us. We have a lot of top pairs, over pairs, etc. But if your opponent defends with that range that was slightly too loose, we're going to be using a much bigger bet size of over pot. And this is going to put all of your opponent's marginal and junky hands in a really nasty scenario. So you can see that the main difference here is that we're just raising the size of our bets with our polarized range. Okay? This dark red color is the hands that are mostly preferring to bet big. And we see, like, look at the nines. A lot of nines and better are using the large size. Also, a lot of overcards with draws, right? So these are all hands that we are going to be betting. Please explain how to play King 10 offsuit in the dealer button. Raise. Here it is right here. We raise with the King 10. In this scenario, we're going to be betting the flop most of the time, obviously, because we have relatively little showdown value, but 2 overcards and some backdoor equity. Some other hands that are going to be betting here are hands like gut shots, overcards with backdoor flush draws, etc., etc., etc. We're going to be betting very, very polarized. And when you're betting polarized and your nut advantage is bigger, just because your range is better than your opponent's because they're defending too wide, that's when you often want to go for a big size. Here we have a handy-dandy chart that shows each player's equity with each portion of their range. Here's how much equity we have, or expected value. And here is like the strength of our hands in general. So what you really want to be concerned with is how much higher is one line over the other line at specific points in the range. Notice both players have the ability to have super nuts on this 9-5-2 board because they all have sets, and the big blind does have a few more 2 pairs. But notice how against the loose big blind defend, the red line is just slightly higher than the green line all the way across the board. And that's going to allow for more betting in general. Or it's going to allow for larger betting in general, especially when we have a large amount of hands that have very high equity, more than the opponent. Okay? Let's take a look at another spot. Here we have the low jack raising and big blind calls. Low jack's range should be very strong. Big blind's defending range, which is what we have here, should also be very strong. But again, a lot of players call far too wide, which is the range we're giving them over here. Again, if these charts are unfamiliar to you, make sure you check out the poker coaching app. They are all in there. Get in there and make good use of them. What about on Jack 7-6, 2 spades? This is a spot where low jack against a GTO player should often be betting using a small size when they do decide to bet. Notice, lots of small betting. But against that loose big blind defend, we should now be blasting it again for pot. A ton, right? At this point, we get to bet more often, and we get to blast it against these players because, again, over pairs and top pairs are just very, 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 very strong. And again, if you look at the way the equities line up, we now have both a nut advantage at the top and the middle, and we just get to really, really apply pressure here because the opponent's range is too trash. When your opponent's range is trash and yours is not, you get to get after it. Let's take a look at another spot. Here we raise the ace-king. Big blind calls. This is a player who is inelastic to bet sizes. These are the players who are just going to check call if they have anything. Normally, this is a spot where we could bet, a third pot, 2/3 pot, etc. But against a player who is just going to call if they have any king or 10 or 4 or draw, just bet bigger and get more money in the pot. Now, obviously, you don't want to bet so big to the point that your opponent will start folding out a hand like a 10. But most players in most cash games are not folding pairs. So as long as you bet something like a little bit less than pot, they're going to stick around and you're going to be able to extract value. This is a turn you're going to be betting large on. Here we overpot it. We're not going to be discussing turn and river betting today, but that is all in the advanced cash game course. This is a great spot to bet big, especially when the turn brings a flush draw. And especially against someone who's just going to be very inclined to call. Most people don't know how to use overbets, but you will after the course. Here's another spot, pocket jacks. We raise it up. Straightforward player, and the big blind calls. Flop comes. 10-9-5. It's another spot where you can just size up against someone who is going to not fold to decently big bets. Again, this is a scenario where you should not be betting this big in GTO world, but we're not playing in GTO world. We're playing against players who are going to be making mistakes. And if your opponent's just going to stick around with all sorts of stuff, you might as well just bet bigger. On the turn, they check. Again, bet big. This is a spot where if they have a 10 or a 9 or a draw, they're sticking around. On the river, we get a great river. Neither player has a 2, which means overpairs are essentially the nuts. When you have the nuts or a blocker to the nuts on the river, and you have a big nut advantage, and your opponent is not going to have very many nuts in these scenarios, this is a spot where you want to be blasting it. And blasting it often means all in cash games for more than the size of the pot. I was actually just recording part of this course today, and we have spots on the river where you should be betting 11 times the size of the pot. You ever bet 11 times the size of the pot on the river? Most people have not, and there are spots for it. Again, we're not going to go through those today, but those are in the course for you. We'll be discussing that in a little bit. What about when we should bet small? By small, I mean really small. Well, there are 3 main times you're going to want to bet small in live cash games from an exploitative point of view. First, if your opponent will defend their big blind too wide such that you have a big range advantage. So if you have a big nut advantage, you want to be betting bigger across the board. But if you have a big range advantage, you're going to be betting more frequently, usually using a smaller size. Next again, if the opponent is inelastic to bet sizes such that if they have nothing, they're just going to fold to any bet. Again, in that scenario, you might as well bet small with your weak hands and make them fold out all their garbage. And finally, if your opponent will not check raise often enough, this allows you to bet thinner for value and protection because now you don't have to worry about betting and then getting pushed off of your hand. And if you do think your opponent's going to be check raising only with good hands, then you can bet middle pair, and then if they check raise you, you can just fold because you know you're in bad shape, right? So if you know these things about your opponents, you can really, really, really get out of line and crush them. All right, let's take another look at a spot. Here we raise low jack, big blind calls. This is what they should defend with, but they are not. They're going to be defending too loose. Let's take a look at ace 8-3. In GTO world, we actually have to do a decent amount of checking here because the opponent's going to have a decent amount of aces and whatnot. And we should be checking about half the time against a good, strong GTO opponent. However, against someone who defends a little bit too loosely, our EV, our expected value, is through the roof. It goes from 4.09 to 4.8, which is a gigantic increase. And this is a situation where you just want to be betting small with everything because we have a big range advantage. Anytime you have a substantial range advantage over your opponent compared to what you would normally have, you're usually going to be betting more often using a small size. And when I say small here, I mean 20% pot, even smaller than 33% pot we allowed over here. By the way, when you do bet smaller, you get to bet more frequently across the board. That's just a good, strong GTO principle. When you bet smaller, you get to bet a wider range. Here we have a spot where low jack raises, big blind calls, flop comes. This is what your opponent should check raise with when you continuation bet jack 7-5 for a third pot bet. So we bet this range. Here is what the opponent should continue with. Notice they should be check raising with pocket jacks, pocket sevens, pocket sixes. I think a lot of people do that. 10-8 and 9-8 and 10-9. Are people check raising the gut shot and open-ended every time? Or a lot of the time? Some do, some don't. What about 5-4 and 5-3? Ugh, 5-3. Most people are not check raising the 5-3 on the jack 7-6. Flush draws, people will check raise. What about these weird ones in here? 9-7 and 8-7 and 7-5. I don't think most people check raise 9-7, 8-7, or 7-5 ever. So this is a spot where I'm going to presume people are not check raising quite often enough. Okay, so let's make them check raise half as often as they normally would. Just divide all these raises by 2. How much is that going to impact your betting range? It's going to impact it a little bit. It's going to impact it a lot. We're already betting a pretty good amount of the time. Keep in mind our EV is 3.69 here. If they don't check raise often enough, we now get 3.95 big blinds out of this pot, and we get to bet 20% pot with everything, which is quite powerful. Whenever you get to bet far more frequently, even using a small size with your entire range, because your opponent is not defending well by check raising often enough, you are going to crush them. What do we have here? Exploiting an auto continuation better. Is this even the right thing I want to be talking about? Let's not talk about it. Let's go talk about a hand. Here we have 6-5 of spades. We raise it up. Tight player calls. Flop comes queen, 10, 7. Opponent checks. What do you do with the 6-5 of spades on the queen, 10, 7 board? Well, in GTO world, you're probably just done with it. This is a horrible board for you. If you are going to bet, though, you definitely want to bet big. This is a very dynamic board, meaning the current nuts is somewhat likely to not be the nuts by the river. So if we are going to bet in this spot in a GTO world, we need to be betting on the bigger side, like 2/3 pot. However, we're against this tight passive player. Against a tight passive player who is going to fold unless they have something, we should just bet tiny. It may seem insane to bet tiny in this spot, but if they have nothing, they're going to fold. And then we win the pot. And obviously, whatever they're folding is probably better than the 6 high. So this is an excellent spot to bet small against a player who's going to play in a straightforward manner against you in a relatively cautious way. So remember how we were betting big against players who would just stick around with any piece of the flop when we had a value hand. Here we're going to be betting tiny against those players who are going to be folding if they don't have anything. If we had a really good hand here, like ace-queen, we would be betting on the bigger side, like 60. Purely to extract value because we expect this player to call when they have something, fold when they have nothing. This is a nice exploitative play that's going to result in you getting the pot much larger when you have a value hand, and you're going to end up not losing nearly as much as you should with your bluffs, or you're going to be able to bluff substantially wider. Here we have another one, pocket threes. We raise it up with threes. Tight player calls. Flop comes ace, king, 6. Another spot where you should be betting big. We literally just talked about this. This is a spot where in GTO world, we should be betting quite big in this scenario because we have a lot of the best aces and the sets, and the opponent does not. So we have a big nut advantage, right? When you have a big nut advantage, you bet big. However, this is another spot where we can just bet tiny. If they don't have anything, they're going to let it go. And the nice thing about betting tiny on this flop is that whatever they're folding has pretty good equity against pocket threes. And if they call you, yeah, you're not loving it, but you're probably just going to be done. We made a tiny bluff at the flop, and we pick it up. I mean, you got to realize, here when we're betting $7 into the $39 pot, we need to pick up the pot like the 20-ish% of the time or something like that in order to profit. And we're going to pick up the pot far more than 20-ish% of the time in this situation. And every once in a while, I even call the hand like Jack 10 and we check it down and we win. So this is a spot where you want to be betting frequently and small when your opponent is going to fold when they don't have anything. So you want to look for spots like this to really, really, really push your opponents around. So yeah, let's recap this really quickly before we go and talk about this advanced cash game course I have coming out. You want to be betting small against people who defend too wide, such that your range advantage is big. You also want to be betting small, especially with bluffs, to target their folding range when they're going to continue against, well, when they're going to continue or they're not, and they don't really care about your bet size. And you want to be betting frequently and small against players who will not check raise enough. And you can go way wider for thin value / protection, which is going to add a lot of EV to your game. And then against players, you want to be betting large exploitatively, again, when they're just going to call a bet with anything decent. Also, you need to be betting bigger against players who won't check raise enough because you need to be able to get money in the pot. And also, you want to be betting bigger against players who defend the big blind too wide, such that your nut advantage is bigger. So realize some boards will give you a very big nut advantage against a wide range. Some boards will give you a very big range advantage against a wide range. And when you have the nut advantage, that's when you're going big. When you have the range advantage, that's usually when you're going to be going small. So, before we move forward, this is your last chance to enter the giveaway. We're giving away 3 free months of Poker Coaching Premium and access to our new course. And if you want to enter, head over to pokercoaching.com/guestcoach right now. We're going to be closing that very, very soon. And right now, you can go to pokercoaching.com/pass. Poker Coaching Premium, my entire site, is all available for you to use for free, for $0. I am that confident that you will like it and you will enjoy it and you will learn something. And, you know, if you learn something, you start winning a ton of money from poker, maybe you'll sign up and you'll give me some money. So head over to pokercoaching.com and check it out right now. I also have some exciting news that I've been working hard and I'm really excited to share with you. Goodness gracious, my brain can't work. I have something else I want to share with you. And I actually am excited. Whenever I get excited, I can't read very well and I can't think very well. Kind of like poker players, you know? If you're ever playing in a game against someone who is playing a little bit too high, whenever they get super excited and act out of turn, they almost always have the nuts. Well, whenever I can't read, I'm excited. So I guess I'm just like them. My team and I have been working super hard to put together the most advanced course we have ever made to help you become a cash game crusher. It is the advanced cash game course on pokercoaching.com, and you can actually get a sneak peek right now. Head over to pokercoaching.com/peek to get first access to this new course. There's over 30 plus hours of content in this course, but you cannot buy it. It is not for sale. The only way to get access is to become a Poker Coaching Premium member. And if you join Poker Coaching Premium during our Black Friday sale, or if you're already a member right now, you will get access to the advanced cash game course for as long as you stay a member. Our Black Friday sale starts November 14th. So make sure you're paying attention to that. We'll post about it on all the social media platforms. And if you want to get access to the advanced cash game course, be sure to mark your calendar for November 14th to get an excellent deal on pokercoaching.com. Let's go through a few sections of the course. We have a large section featuring online cash game crusher Brad Wilson. He is going to teach you all sorts of exploits for six-handed, online, tough cash games. You may think against the best players online, just play GTO, you'll be fine. But there is still room to exploit your opponents. And that's going to allow you, well, to crush them. Next, we have Rampage Poker. He's going to be reviewing many of his biggest high-stakes live cash games, as well as some heads up that he played recently against Doug Polk at the Lodge. I know Rampage likes to punt, but he's actually getting at least okay at poker. Next, Justin Saliba, tournament master, but did you know he grew his entire bankroll by playing cash games, and he still plays them today. He's going to be sharing exploitative advanced GTO concepts for live cash games. So be sure you are extracting as much value as you can from those games. We also have an advanced section featuring Jonathan Jaffe. Jonathan Jaffe is literally one of the best heads-up players in the world. And he actually gets in there, battles hard, and plays with Justin Saliba. And then they talk about what went right, what went wrong, and they study the game, which is a whole lot of fun. I have a bunch of sections in this course. We have a section where I go through pre-flop strategies. We actually have completely new charts at pokercoaching.com for all sorts of multi-way scenarios for cash games, both 6-handed with a rake and 8-handed with no rake taken out of each pot, like you'll encounter in live cash games where you play, or where you don't pay a rake every hand, but you pay a rake every 30 minutes or to get in the casino. So we have brand new charts. I go through and explain all of those. I also have a large section on bet sizing, kind of like we talked about here, but way more in depth. And we have a big section on multi-way pots, advanced exploits on all betting rounds, etc., etc., etc. We have a lot of content on pokercoaching.com in this new course. We also have a brand new coach, a brand new guest coach who is excited to share his cash game secrets with you. Are you ready for the big reveal? Make sure you type it in the, make sure you go and you enter the giveaway. You have about 2 seconds because the giveaway is about to close. Okay, fine, the giveaway is closed. It is time for the big reveal. Let's meet your new cash game coach. No, it's not Doug Polk.
2 queens pre-flop for Doug, 2 kings for Chris. Roughly 120 big blinds deep apiece coming into this one. Brewer has Doug covered. Now he jams, and Doug makes the call. Oh my God! If there's a candidate for most heavily haunted soul in poker, it's got to be that of Chris Brewer.
He's not ran very hot.
Kings, Brewer with jacks, Martirosian with queens, less than 20 bigs to start the hand. What a hand!
Raise all in.
All of it.
This is a pretty wild spot. I mean, our tool has to be like ace king or queen.
Could you imagine folding jacks with 20 big blinds?
Spot on.
You are asking me? Don't ask me.
Spot on assessment. Jacks in the muck.
Recreational.
And ace king again.
Brewer's got that look. Oh,
He
boy.
does jam. Martirosian will snap it off, and here we go. Or is it Brewer's time to be on the right side of a bad beat? King 9-5. Needs a 6 that's not a spade. And finds the 6 that's not a spade! Think of all the beats! Think of all the bubbles! Chris Brewer has fought through the worst of it in his career, but he now comes out on top to win the game's ultimate prize.
I don't know. It just, everything today, I just felt like it was going to go my way. It just, nothing bothered me. It all just felt really good. It means so much, and like, I've had, sorry, I've had so many tough ones. It feels really good.
Let's get to the good part then. It is my honor to present to you your first World Series of Poker bracelet. Go ahead and hold it up to that camera. There he is, Chris Brewer, the winner of the $250K Super High Roller.
There you have it. It is indeed Chris Brewer. He is your new cash game coach. He has some content in our advanced cash game course as well. And, you know, if you all like it, maybe he'll stick around and make some more content in the future. We will see. So that is it. That is our advanced cash game course. It is going to be released very soon. And I cannot be more excited to share all this stuff with you because, you know, while I am pretty good at poker, I have worked very hard to surround myself with people who are substantially better than me at poker. And all these people, besides probably Rampage, they're all better than me at poker, and I learn from them, and I'm making a point to share all of that with you. So, very, very excited for the Advanced Cash Game course. It's going to be coming out very, very, very soon in November. Also, do not forget, right now, you can try out everything we have at pokercoaching.com for free. Right now, $0. $0. Most training sites don't let you go to their site and you only have to pay $0. But that's what we're doing because I know that you're going to like it. And if you like it, you may keep coming back. So yeah, that's that. I hope you all enjoyed today's show. I want to thank all of you for being here. You have no poker friends. You know what? The great thing about poker trading sites is that you essentially get to make friends with many of the best players in the game, and they are happy to share their information with you and their strategies with you. So yeah, that's good. You never catch the live stream before. Well, good. Thank you very much. I realize this one was a little bit shorter today. I did not know how long it would take me to go through those exploitative spots. Someone asked about the ace-10 hand. Should the opponent have folded by the river? Let's talk about that real quick. We raise the pocket jacks, big blind calls, 10-9-5. Should they ever fold? Obviously not. Turns a 2. They check. We're going to be betting again. Should they ever fold ace-10? Obviously not. River's a 2. They check. I go all in. Should they ever fold ace-10? Of course not. If they're going to be folding ace-10 here, they're going to get absolutely demolished. You have to realize ace-10 is one of the best hands the opponent can have. If they're folding ace-10, they're folding essentially everything. I mean, a better question would be, should they fold like a random 9? The problem that the opponent has here is that I could easily have a lot of draws. Now, you may say, my opponent's never bluffed the flop with king-jack and then bet the turn and jam the river. But you probably should be. So this is a spot where, assuming the opponent is trying to play well at all, they absolutely cannot go around folding the ace-10. Anytime you're trying to play reasonably well, you cannot fold the best hands that you could possibly have. So yeah, head over to pokercoaching.com/peek right now if you want a sneak peek of the advanced cash game course. Head over to pokercoaching.com/pass right now if you want full access to the entire site for $0. I want to thank all of you for being here. Good luck in your games. Have fun. I wish you all the best. I hope you have a great week.